Hello and welcome to Where to Go. I'm James Atkinson, Senior Brand Manager at DK Eyewitness.
And I'm Lucy Richards, Senior Editor at DK Eyewitness.
And welcome to Where to Go, where every fortnight we find out more about the world's favourite travel destinations with those people who know those places best. And today we have one of those people who knows the world kind of best, really. So it's a sort of special episode because we are joined by our friend Shafik.
Yes.
So Shafik, you may remember, spoke to us about Unforgettable Journeys in season 1 all that time ago. But Shafik is a true veteran of a lot of the publishing that we do at DK Eyewitness. He's a real expert. Our team rely on him for his kind of knowledge around the world. And very excitingly, he's got a new book out. So we need to talk about that, basically.
We do. He's also just an all-round lovely chap. So it'll be lovely to be chatting to him about various destinations today.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited to find out where he's actually planning to go to because knowing Shafik, I mean, he's kind of been everywhere, I think.
He has, and he has been to some, I think he favours some particularly, amazing, wild, epic destinations. So I think we're in for a real odyssey today.
The real extremes kind of offered up by the world. So without further ado, let's go speak to Shafik.
Yes, Shafik is an award-winning journalist, travel writer, author, editor, broadcaster and photographer who has co-authored more than 50 guidebooks for Rough Guides, Lonely Planet, Time Out, many others, including, of course, us at DK Eyewitness. And his new book, Crossed Off the Map, Travels in Bolivia, was published on the 15th of March this year.
So huge congratulations to Shafik on the publication of his book, and welcome, Shafik. Hello.
Welcome.
Thanks, guys. Lovely to be speaking to you again.
Welcome to the podcast. Welcome back, I should say.
Yay.
Yes, we're very excited to talk to you about a range of destinations. So as we normally kick things off, we'll be finding out a little bit more about Shafik, and then we'll have 3 sections, one on each destination he loves, starting off, of course, with the subject of his new book, Bolivia.
So, Shaf, you've travelled so much as a travel writer. This is a hard question, but what do you sort of love most about the job, apart from the obvious, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, on a very basic level, I find it an incredibly rewarding, challenging, invigorating experience. Working as a travel writer constantly throws me into contact with new people, places, ideas and experiences. While indulging my curiosity and restlessness. It also provides me with, a greater sense of freedom than I think I would have in almost any other career. Though not without its challenges, and certainly not always as glamorous as people might think. Working as a travel writer is a huge privilege.
Yeah, so it's not just going on holidays, is it? It's very much kind of strategically thinking about what you're doing, where you're going, how you're writing about it, how you're responding to briefs, etc., and working for, it's hard work, basically, isn't it?
Absolutely. I'm glad we finally got some recognition of the of the hard work that goes into travel writing.
Absolutely. And you're going to talk to, it must have been quite hard because you've been to many, many, many places, and you're going to talk to us about just 3 of them today. How did you kind of settle upon those 3 without giving too much away about each?
Well, it was a difficult challenge just narrowing it down to 3 destinations, because as you say, I've been lucky enough to kind of work all around the world as a travel writer. I think it really goes back to my childhood. I've always been an inveterate reader, and childhood books about places like the Amazon, Patagonia, the Himalayas, the vast expanse of Antarctica captured my imagination and never really let go. With India, one of the countries I'm going to talk about, there was a family connection too. My paternal family are originally from Gujarat, but moved to Uganda and then to the UK and beyond. Visiting Antarctica was always a dream. I think it probably originated from watching, countless David Attenborough wildlife documentaries while I was growing up. And Bolivia, in many ways, encapsulates everything I love about travel. Incredible landscapes, culturally rich, and a fascinating history as well.
Let's start with Bolivia. So I want to know kind of when did you first visit Bolivia? You've traveled pretty extensively across South America. Was Bolivia the first place you visited?
Well, It goes back to my very first visit to South America back in 2004. This was before I was a travel writer. I was a sports reporter in London at the time. But with my girlfriend at the time, we decided to leave our jobs and go backpacking around India and then around South America for the best part of a year. And after having Carnival in Rio, we headed over to Peru to hike the Inca Trail, to Machu Picchu, classic gringo trail activities. But the overland journey between the two took us through Bolivia, which I really didn't know much about at the time. But after, exploring from the Andes to the Amazon, I really became fascinated by the place. Scroll forward a few years, and I was living across the border in Argentina. And at that time, I became the co-author of the Rough Guide to Bolivia. And that allowed me to travel around the country in far greater depth than would otherwise have been possible. And it was through these travels that the idea for my new book, Crossed Off the Map, really came to light.
Cool.
So tell us a bit more about the book then, Shaf. What what can readers expect from the book?
Yeah, I mean, over the last 15 years, I've worked as a travel writer on all 7 continents, but I've never visited anywhere quite like Bolivia. I think like lots of travellers, I was initially drawn in by its dramatic landscape. It has the world's biggest salt flat, the world's highest city, the world's most biodiverse national park, to name just a few. It's also remarkably culturally rich. But as I got to know Bolivia better, I began to learn about its profound, unexpected impacts on the world. Fragments of history that have largely been forgotten beyond its borders. I also realised that it stood on the front line of many of the touchstone issues of the 21st century, from the climate emergency to populism. It was just too good a story not to tell. So Bolivia, despite being roughly twice the size of France, shares borders with Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Peru, Paraguay, is right in the heart of South America. But it tends to be overshadowed by its neighbours. It never really makes much of an appearance in the international media. Travel writers all seem to hurry through it en route to somewhere else. There hasn't been a major travelogue solely about Bolivia for many years. So I saw a gap in the market for a book that, explored its fascinating history, its incredible landscapes, and also looked at how Bolivia is coping with all these contemporary challenges and what it can tell all of us around the world about what we can expect in the future.
And kind of, is that what you meant by like sort of the title Crossed Off the Map, in terms of, it's generally not really seen as part of that kind of the what you kind of described as the Gringo Trail earlier, like as people's main routes around Latin America as somewhere that is a destination in and of its own right as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, so the title Crossed Off the Map comes from an apocryphal story from the 19th century about a supposed diplomatic spat between Queen Victoria and Bolivia, which resulted in the expulsion of the ambassador. Anyway, supposedly after this, according to the story, which is known as the Black Legend, in South America, Queen Victoria took a map of South America and ceremoniously crossed Bolivia's name off of it. Now, that's an apocryphal story. It's a tall tale, but it seemed to really sum up in many ways, what's actually happened to Bolivia over the subsequent 150 years or so. It sometimes really feels as if Bolivia was crossed off the map.
Fascinating.
Yeah, I was going to say, so for those kind of, I don't know, to kind of sum up Bolivia for people who would want to kind of visit there or something, what are some of the main things that you would kind of have to see? I mean, I'm not asking you to tell your whole book or spoil your whole book within the answer to one question, but kind of, what are some of the things that we're actually missing out on? I
mean, I really could talk about this all day, but I'm not gonna put you through that. I'll keep it.
You've got two
short.
other destinations to get through, remember, and one's India. It's pretty massive.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, one of the things I love about Bolivia really is its sheer geographical diversity. You got mountains and rainforests, salt flats and wetlands. So I will say to people, I absolutely love the western Andean side of the country, particularly the Salar de Uyuni and the neighbouring Reserva Eduardo Avaroa. So these are otherworldly landscapes. A gleaming salt flat, roughly the size of Jamaica, islands of giant cacti and these creatures called vishkashas, which are like rabbits. You have smouldering volcanoes and lakes that have been stained red and green by minerals, huge flocks of flamingos. So I love that part of it. And that's often the side of Bolivia that most people associate with the country. But also a third of the country is within the Amazon Basin. And I absolutely love this region, particularly Parque National Madidi. So you can only access it by boat from a former rubber trading town called Ruanabaque. And it's roughly the size of Wales. And it's also the most biodiverse protected area on Earth. To put that in context, it's home to roughly 1,000 species of birds, which is almost 10% of the world's total in this park alone.
Wow.
Seriously?
And it's also home to an array of jaguars and anacondas, stingrays, spectacled bears, and these incredible creatures called bufeos, which are pink river dolphins. If you visit today, you may be lucky enough to get the chance to swim with them. They're incredibly playful, intelligent animals, and that's one of my most memorable experiences in travel is swimming with these dolphins in the Amazon.
Oh well, I'm not surprised. That sounds amazing. Did you say that 10% of the world's bird population is in that particular region?
So roughly 10% of the bird species on Earth can be found in this park alone, and this is only a small part of the Bolivian Amazon as a whole. And it's got,
that's amazing.
That's in the space size of Wales.
Roughly the size of Wales.
Wow.
You always have to compare things to Wales to kind of give a gravitas to the size.
Wales is that kind of unfortunate geographical stencil that we put on a lot of things.
Yeah.
Wow. So it's an amazing natural landscape. Are there sort of towns and cities in Bolivia, or is it significantly, are you going for sort of wildlife?
Yeah, I mean, an awful lot of people are drawn both by the wildlife and by the natural attractions. On the Andean side, I haven't even mentioned Lake Titicaca, the world's highest.
Of course,
of course.
One of the world's highest lakes. And you've got huge plains. You've got the Pantanal, which Bolivia shares with Brazil, which is the world's largest tropical wetlands, is equally rich in wildlife there. But the cities are absolutely fascinating too. I mean, a lot of Bolivia is a very high altitude place. You've got two of the highest cities on Earth in El Alto and Potosi. They're also incredibly dramatic Andean locations, and they're very culturally rich. El Alto, which neighbours the de facto capital La Paz. It's one of the fastest growing cities in Latin America. It's got an incredibly strong indigenous culture. It's kind of wonderful markets. It's a very vibrant, fascinating place. And then not too far away is Potosi, which has a fascinating and tragic history. So the richest silver mine ever discovered is in a mountain that overlooks the city. According to legend, so much silver was taken out of this mountain during the Spanish colonial era. You could have built a solid silver railway line all the way from Bolivia to Madrid. It's had a profound impact on everything from the Industrial Revolution to the Great Wall of China. And it's also in Potosi today, it kind of has resulted in these incredible architectural riches, churches and mansions, the Royal Mint. So, those are just two of the cities that are kind of fascinating to visit. And you also have somewhere called Sucre, which is, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful places in Latin America. It's the historic centre of it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's nicknamed the White City because everything is whitewashed, and it feels like walking around a film set.
Cool. I think I have heard about that. Yeah, it's what kind of what gave it its is it really really old? What gave it its kind of heritage site status?
So the thing with Sucre is linked to the silver mines in Potosi, because Potosi is a high altitude place. It's quite inhospitable to live in. Sucre is more than 1,000 meters lower, has a much more temperate climate, and so lots of the wealthy mine owners would move to Sucre subsequently, and they
the wealth kind of trickled down really, and
yeah, absolutely, and kind of later, it's home to one of the oldest universities in South America. For a long period, it was Bolivia's capital. It's still the it's still the de jure capital, even though most of the political action has moved to La Paz. So it's got a lot of heritage, a lot of culture, and it's also a very cosmopolitan place. It's attracted kind of people from all around the world, which kind of gives it a really nice vibe. It's also home to the most fascinating cement works, I think, on the planet.
Okay.
So this sounds pretty strange, and it's on the outskirts of the city. And when you first look at it, it just looks like a quarry, essentially, with a huge white, dusty cliff with tractors going past and smoke bellowing out of the chimneys. But if you look closely at the cliff face, you'll notice there's all these patterns on it, and it's actually the world's biggest collection of dinosaur footprints. So paleontologists think that there was a stampede. So essentially, lots and lots of thousands of dinosaurs chasing across this vast plain, which then through tectonic pressure was pushed up when the Andes was formed, and has now been exposed in this quarry. So it's got a lot of kind of really diverse, interesting things to see and experience.
Okay, that's a great quarry.
I don't think that we've had dinosaurs mentioned on the podcast before, James.
I think that might be a podcast first. Yeah. No. Jurassic Coast. We've talked about the Jurassic Coast.
Oh yeah, but a stampede of dinosaurs—that's really really cool, Shaf.
Yeah,
that's good fact.
It's definitely our first stampede of dinosaurs for sure.
Glad to hear it.
I was going to finally kind of ask about Bolivia because I think one of the things that's synonymous with it, for better or worse, is altitude. And I know, like, tapping into your old sports writer self, Shaf, am I right in thinking La Paz has like the highest football pitch or international football pitch in the world or something? Or that might be Quito in Ecuador, I'm not too sure.
Yeah, there's Bolivia. So La Paz has a very high altitude international football stadium. I think it's around 3,600 meters above sea level. Yeah. And as you might expect, Bolivia, that in general terms doesn't have a great record in international football, as anyone who follows the South American football closely, but they have a formidable home record.
That's what I was thinking of, because teams find it quite difficult to go there.
And actually, funny enough, when the time before last that I was there, Bolivia beat Argentina at home.
Wow.
So there was a sign of lots of rejoicing. An even higher football stadium, though, is in El Alto, which is the neighbouring city just a bit higher, and they've got a team that has been nicknamed the PSG of Bolivia because they've had a lot of money pumped into them recently.
Yes,
and their home ground is above 4,000 meters of altitude, and they're doing really well in the South American equivalent of the European Cup at the moment. So one to watch out for.
Yeah, I think I've just heard so many stories of players feeling sick or passing out halfway through games and stuff.
Oh, Lord.
But I was going to ask, that was my tenuous link to drive it towards football. But actually, I really wanted to ask kind of how you deal with the altitude when you're there. Have you got used to it when you visited, or does it take a while?
Yeah, it always hits you, and you always feel it, even if you don't actually suffer from altitude sickness itself. The highest international airport is in El Alto, and an awful lot of people will fly there from sea level, and it does hit you hard. I always advise take it very, very easy for the first couple of days. In La Paz, locals have a saying about how to cope with the altitude, which is to drink little, eat little, and sleep alone. So kind of take it very, very easy. But it can, obviously can have a serious impact. So you want to be aware of it, and it's unpredictable. You can be very fit physically fit and young and all of that, and it can still hit you. They often advise drinking coca leaf tea or chewing coca leaves, which are legal in Bolivia, not legal outside of Bolivia. Do not take them out, away with you. But inside, that can help to alleviate some of the symptoms of the altitude. Typically the best treatment for altitude sickness is to descend, of course. But it definitely hits you. And, just walking around the streets, I always think it gives you like an insight into the aging process, because climbing a small flight of stairs, feels like scaling Everest.
Yeah.
It really takes it out of you.
Fascinating.
Well, thanks so much for that intro to Bolivia, Shafik. And I think obviously listeners can hear a lot more about Bolivia in your book, Crossed Off the Map. But we are now going to quickly discuss India.
So obviously we're talking about India, which is huge, Shaf. So I doubt we're going to cover everywhere. Are there any sort of specific regions that you want to particularly highlight?
Yeah, I mean, I always like to champion Madhya Pradesh, which is a state in central India that I think is really underappreciated by foreign tourists. It's home to some fantastic tiger reserves, particularly Kanha and Bandhavgarh. In these places, you have as good a chance of spotting these big cats in the wild as anywhere on Earth. To give you a little flavour of that, the last time I visited Kanha, before the pandemic, I was in a taxi outside the park, just driving along the road, and a tiger crossed the road in front of us, bringing us to a halt. And it just, very confidently spent a few minutes, trotting over. So, I mean, just to put, that it shows just how easy it is to see these big cats in the wild. Amazing. To see a tiger in the wild is a mesmerising experience. But elsewhere in Madhya Pradesh is very varied. There's a wonderful UNESCO World Heritage Site called Khajuraho. And this is a kind of a stunning collection of temples that are covered by eye-opening and incredibly inventive erotic carvings. So there's various theories about these sculptures.
This might be a first, erotic carvings.
This is definitely a first. Yes.
Dinosaurs and erotic carvings. I try and bring a bit of difference to the point. So there's lots of theories.
Sorry, erotic carvings. Let's go back.
Yeah. So there's lots of theories about why these temples are covered by these, frankly eye-opening sculptures. Some people say they represent Shiva's wedding party. Others say they were linked to a tantric cult. Some people even say they were inspired by the Kama Sutra.
That's what I was going to suggest.
Yeah. So whatever the reason, they were a remarkable thing to see. Less erotically charged, but similarly impressive. Madhya Pradesh is also home to one of the oldest religious structures in South Asia. It's a Buddhist stupa, which is like an iconic domed temple, and it's called Sanchi, and it dates back to the 3rd century BCE. It sits alone in the countryside and is a tranquil, remarkable place to have a look round.
Amazing. That's a really, really, really good quick guide to
good varied travel guide within that.
Super succinct, super helpful. And you mentioned about kind of like when you talked about kind of travel writing for the first time, like how you left and went to India was your first destination, right? When you went there, what's kind of brought you back, like time and time again?
I mean, I think it's, the sheer size and diversity of India in all senses of the world means you could spend a lifetime exploring it and still only scratch the surface. There's some truth in the old cliche that it's more like a continent than a country. Yeah. And every time I go, I just discover more places that I need to visit the next time. And the other thing is the food, of course, which is sensational and much more varied than the Indian food we typically get in the UK. At the moment, I particularly love the cuisine of Calcutta, as was, which has excellent seafood, often flavoured with coconut and mustard oil. There's a strong tradition of Indian, Chinese cuisine there. The street food is great. They've got something called a kati roll, which is like a paratha flatbread stuffed with goodies, kind of spiked with chili and lime juice. And plenty of sweets as well. And they have a very sweet tooth in the city. So it's fantastic to give you an insight into the culture in India, or in fact the very varied, very myriad cultures in India.
Would you say kind of like that first visit to India like kind of sparked your, did you know you wanted to become a travel writer at that point, or was it still like kind of early days really?
Yeah, so when I set off travelling, as I say, I was a sports reporter. I was covering football and cricket mainly for the Evening Standard in London, which was something that I'd always wanted to do up to that point. But it was this trip and my time in India and then in South America that really the idea of becoming a travel writer kind of came to mind. I did my first bits of travel writing while I was over in the countries, and I used the guidebooks and kind of thought, I wonder who writes these books. That would be a great job. So it was, without sounding overly dramatic, it was a life-changing trip because I left on my travels as a sports reporter and I came back wanting to become a travel writer. And then, there were a few ups and downs before I managed to make it happen. But yeah, that was the impetus behind it.
Be honest, you were really reading those guidebooks and thinking like, who writes these? I can do better. I know I can get better stuff in there, right?
I definitely thought this will be this just looks an easy, glamorous job. All the cliches that people have with travel writing, who don't work in the industry, I had all of them beforehand, and one of my great disappointments in life in that it hasn't been as easy and as glamorous all the time as I perhaps hoped.
As people think.
Yeah, I mean, we know many guidebook writers, and it's certainly not as glamorous as you'd think.
So, Shaf, I've the only place I've done in India has been the Golden Triangle. So that's Delhi, Agra, and Jaipur. So that's a massively popular sort of portion of the country. Are there any kind of hidden gems away from those cliched trips that you're willing to share with readers?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of places spring immediately to mind. As long as you guys and the listeners promise to keep them to yourselves, okay?
Yeah.
Don't worry, you can trust us.
Good, excellent, excellent. I'm glad I got your word for it.
Very trustworthy. That's and I'm sure our listeners are too.
Yeah. Well, so the first is in Madhya Pradesh again, and it's called Orcha, which is a town. The name Orcha literally translates as hidden place, and it's a medieval complex of forts and temples, palaces, tombs and gardens along the banks of the Betwa River, kind of lapped up by the ever-encroaching forest. It's a tranquil and atmospheric place to while away a few days. You can literally stay in a palace there if you want. Cool. Orcha's not exactly unknown. It's just down the road from Kajawal, but it really receives far fewer visitors than it should do. The other place I'd like to give a shout out for is even more off the beaten track. Arunachal Pradesh in the far northeast of India. It's a small Himalayan state that borders Tibet and Bhutan. It's known as the land of the dawn-lit mountains. And it's really an unspoilt wilderness. Think snowy mountain passes, remote Buddhist monasteries, alpine forests, and literally hundreds of species of orchids. Very few people make it there. When I visited for the first time about 10 years ago, I was the only foreign traveller in the state that month. As you might expect, getting around is quite a challenge, to put it mildly, but it's an incredibly rewarding place. And it also showcases a completely different side to India, kind of away from, the Golden Triangle that you mentioned earlier, Lucy. It's kind of, and it's also a side of India that, a lot of people in India aren't familiar with and, don't always see. It's a magical place.
If our conversation with Shafik has inspired your inner explorer, you can get closer to your next adventure with an array of new DCAL Witness books. Try Outdoor Europe for discovering the great outdoors with over 150 activities including coasteering, stargazing, foraging, forest bathing and trail running. Or how about Ride, our guide to cycling the world, packed with over 100 adventures over 6 continents. Find both books at your local bookshop or click the link in our episode bio to browse our range. Right, I'm just going to sort of start off by saying, Shafik, why Antarctica? I mean, it's not your usual sort of place. I mean, we've talked about like kind of podcast first. This is the first time we've like zoned in on Antarctica. We did mention it in the last time you were with us. But yeah, why?
I mean, I think quite simply, Antarctica is the greatest wilderness on Earth. It's inhospitable, otherworldly, unfathomably beautiful. There's hundreds of thousands of penguins huddling together, looming icebergs the size of small countries, pods of whales, great walls of ice, that look like they've been sculpted by a surrealist. I think traveling to Antarctica is perhaps the ultimate journey available on Earth, really. And modern day cruises are now very comfortable, but as you're sailing through the region, it's kind of easy to imagine yourselves following in the footsteps of the great polar explorers, people like Amundsen, Scott, Shackleton. I think it's also a really interesting place because, it gives us perhaps the starkest insight into the impact of the climate emergency. Obviously not that we should need to travel to the White Continent to be aware of that. But, when I visited, I went to South Georgia, which is an island just north of Antarctica, with a photographer that had worked with David Attenborough in the 80s and 90s. And he showed me how one particular glacier had retreated hundreds of meters since his first visit, which was a powerful image, to say the least.
Mm. It sounds, Shaf, like Antarctica met your expectations. Because I imagine people going to Antarctica, it's not a weekend away, is it? It sounds like it just doesn't disappoint. It just sounds so epic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I've been wanting to go to Antarctica. It feels like all my life, and it was. I went a few years ago on a 3-week expedition, setting off from Patagonia in Argentina and sailing via the Falkland Islands, via South Georgia, and then onto the Antarctic Peninsula. And it definitely didn't disappoint. I mean, no matter how many times you've watched videos or you've seen pictures or read books about it, nothing really prepares you for visiting, and certainly nothing prepares you from actually setting foot on the continent itself. It's kind of a mind expanding, humbling experience.
I mean, people use the term bucket list like far too much, but that really is like, a kind of life goal experience. As you say, like kind of going and walking in the footsteps of those great explorers and going to somewhere where, most people couldn't dream of being able to go to Antarctica. And there must be something really, really kind of special about that. But then, as you say, actually the beauty that's kind of attached to it as well, and that not disappointing too. What did you get up to when you've been in Antarctica? We did we did draft out some questions, and we have not to ruin the mystique of the podcast, but we do have like templates and stuff, and they're usually like best things to do, where to go, what to see, and it's like, I don't think there'll be like a great taco truck in Antarctica anywhere.
Not yet.
Maybe there is. Not yet. That's the challenge, listener. That's it.
I mean, the cruises are actually incredibly varied. With the company that I went with, they specialised in citizen science, so they really tried to get passengers involved in doing some scientific research, and this research fed back to institutions such as NASA, universities in the US and beyond. So we did cloud surveys. We tested water for microplastics. We did penguin surveys. That's a particularly fun experience.
I bet.
And also,
let's come back to that.
And also like whale surveys as well, obviously, because the Antarctic is incredibly rich in whales. So that kind of provided a framework around a lot of the other activities, which, you could easily just spend hours and hours watching a giant iceberg drift by, or until your fingers go numb. At least you can just wander around through a giant penguin colony, or get caught in a blizzard, or cruise around on a Zodiac boat. I also did something called a polar plunge, which they like to save for the end of the trips, which as you might expect is a quick dip in the water itself. We did it in a place called Deception Island, which is, if you imagine the flooded caldera of a volcano that you can sail into. I think it's one of the only calderas that you can actually sail into. So the water there is supposedly slightly warmer than you would get elsewhere. It certainly didn't feel like that, and it was zero at best. So you have to you have a bit of a swim, a plunge rather than a swim, really, and then you get out and try and desperately warm up as quickly as you can, which in my case took the best part of half a day.
Oh God, I'm not surprised. How long were you in the water for?
It felt like a lifetime, but it probably was only about 30 seconds.
Yeah, that cold then.
Well, did you actually plunge in as well? Did you dive in, or did you gently? I mean, it's possibly worse to gently go into it, right?
Yeah. So my top tip for this is some people kind of delicately, gingerly walked in, kind of got them wet. Got themselves wet in stages. My approach was exactly the opposite. Took the clothes off, ran as quickly as I could towards the water, and then dived under. You have to get your head wet really for it to be considered a proper polar plunge. So I just did it as quickly as possible, and then I started swimming as quickly and as vigorously as I possibly could to try and keep my heart from stopping and to keep me moving about.
Yeah, that's wise. I mean, it's a better approach.
Yeah, I think the opposite one of just letting yourself. No, I couldn't do that. No. I would step back. You don't want to give yourself any chance of backing out of that, I guess, do you?
No, absolutely not. You want instinct to take over, instinct and self-preservation to take over.
Yeah. And then, Shaf, the penguin survey. I think listeners probably are tell us more about the penguins. What does that involve?
It's quite a simple activity in theory. You visit some of these huge penguin colonies. One of the colonies I think was 400,000 strong. So I mean these are huge places. But on the cruises, no two cruises are the same. You're always following different routes. And because it's such a difficult and expensive place to carry out research, a lot of the places that you're visiting, don't necessarily get a lot of scientific researchers. So it's very useful for the scientific community if you can do as much of much research as possible to help out a bit. And obviously doing penguin surveys is one of them. So it's you're kind of given a set area of land, and you try and count them, and you're also kind of noting down what types of penguins are there. And this, because of climate change, certain penguins that traditionally liked very cold conditions are, having to move deeper south into Antarctica. And other penguins are moving north. So it's, all of this data is useful to get. The thing is, penguins are inherently comic and entertaining and curious creatures. So it often feels like, you're supposed to keep, understandable distance from them. You don't want to interact with them. Passengers are generally good at following this. The penguins are not at all. And so they'll often wander up to you. I've had them wandering through my legs before, and they kind of, they have a quizzical look on their faces when they look at you, which can be quite disconcerting. So, it's not entirely clear who's studying who.
Do they ever attack or anything? Do they ever get aggressive or?
They can, they by all accounts, they can have a fearsome kind of peck on you. I didn't experience this personally, and I think if you went a little bit later in the year when they have young around, when I went, there were just eggs. They can be a bit more aggressive, understandably so. One thing I did see in the Falklands, actually, so just further north from Antarctica, was something called a catastrophic molt, which I'd never come across before. But that's it's when the young are really changing their kind of losing their feathers essentially, and kind of it happens at particular times of the year. But they look like penguins from a horror film. I mean, it's kind of quite a scary sight. But these are just some of the kind of the unexpected things that you'll experience if if you're lucky enough to visit Antarctica.
It's a really good band name, Catastrophic Malt. I have to use that one. But yeah, I can't believe, Shafik, you can say that you've seen penguins molting and you swam in Antarctica. I mean,
Polar plunge.
I still can't. I'm still shuddering a little bit of the thought of that. I'm someone who finds it hard to swim in the sea in Cornwall. Never mind. Never mind Antarctica. So yeah, I really, really take my hat off to you. And like, I mean, it's obviously tricky, but I know access to Antarctica has kind of slightly opened up. I mean, I think it's still quite difficult to go, but how regular are the kind of cruises, and how sustainable are they as well? I guess there's a big question around that, really.
Yeah, I mean, to take the sustainability question first, an awful lot of people will say, from an environmental point of view, you shouldn't be visiting Antarctica at all. And in many respects, that's hard to argue with. But it's kind of programs like the Citizen Science program, in which I took part, hopefully help to kind of alleviate that to some extent. And also, the company that I went with was very keen that passengers should leave as what they call polar ambassadors. Now, I know this sounds like quite a cheesy line that someone might say, but it's really that there's no resident population on Antarctica. It needs everyone else in the world to stand up for it. And I kind of think if you're, if you, like myself, if you've been lucky enough to visit, you need to be doing all that you can to, hold our political leaders, our business leaders, and ourselves to account, and to kind of to do what we can to protect it, and do what we can to protect the world more generally, and kind of face up and deal with the climate emergency. So that's the from a sustainability point of view. From just a visiting point of view, I mean, during the pandemic, like traveling lots of places, Antarctica was, the Antarctic cruises stopped. They are running again now. Roughly speaking, the cruising season runs from November to March. The overwhelming majority of the cruises leave from southern tip of South America, most of them from the city of Ushuaia, which is one of the most southern cities in the world in Argentina, and this is roughly the summer in the southern hemisphere. So it's a little bit warmer, and
it's a balmy 0 degrees or something.
I mean, we've seen actually recently there've been kind of record high temperatures in Antarctica.
Yeah, of course.
And it's sometimes sometimes it's not always as cold as you might expect. Kind of even during more normal, in inverted commas periods. But you should definitely prepare for the cold, because it's the cold in Antarctica really isn't like anything else that you've coped with.
Is it the coldest place you've felt on Earth? I'm guessing, or it must be, right?
It's it's the coldest place I've been on Earth, but I've been well dressed for it. So I had the woolen boots and the multiple layers and all of that kind of stuff. I have felt colder in various places, including in Bolivia, actually, overnight on the salt flats, when essentially I was staying in a shack overnight and the temperature dropped to minus 21 degrees, and kind of the inside of the very flimsy windows froze, and even wrapped in an emergency blanket, I've never felt as cold as that before. But nevertheless, Antarctica is still extremely bitterly cold.
Yes, but completely fine for a nice little plunge. All the same. Well, that's brilliant. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, 3 amazing places, Shafik. Couldn't be more different as well in some ways. You've really given us some treats there in terms of things to take away from. I mean, 3 places which, I think you've shown a different side to as well. I mean, I don't think many people would even consider going to Antarctica, but I love the fact that you've talked about different sides of India too. So thank you so much for that. As we've mentioned already, you can get Shafik's book, Crossed Off the Map. It's available in all good retailers, I'm guessing, all bookshops.
In all good retailers and some bad ones as well.
Yeah, all of them. It must, if not complain. But yeah, thank you once again, Shafik. Best of luck with the book. Can't wait to read it myself. And thanks once again for joining us on Where to Go. And hopefully we'll have you back once again at some point soon.
Oh,
I'm sure we will.
I can't wait. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you guys again. Thanks for having me on.
Lovely to see you, Shaf.
Thanks so much, Shafik.
Thank you.
Huge thanks to Shafik. Wow, Lucy.
Yeah, I think that's the word. It's just wow.
Are you going to take a polar plunge? I want to know that.
I will be honest, that bit didn't massively appeal to me. The penguin survey, I think, is more my vibe, James.
Yeah, I could see you doing a penguin survey.
Yeah, the polar plunge.
In like as many layers as possible.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Yes. I mean, he said it was 30 seconds in the water, and he took about half a day to warm up. And I think I'm sure. There's a Scandinavian phrase about there's not bad weather, there's just bad clothing, or there's not cold weather, and I'm not sure that this applies. I just think surely you just need to wear every item of clothing you can find.
Everything you own.
I can't begin to imagine how cold that must be.
Yeah, that kind of like episode of Friends where he dresses up in like every bit of clothing that Chandler owns. Yeah, that's exactly what you need. So yeah, I don't think I could do a polar plunge either. So congrats to you, Shafik, on that and your amazing book.
Yes.
So yeah, you can find. As we mentioned, you can find Crossed Off the Map in all good bookshops now. And if you'd like to find out what Shafik is up to, you can follow him on Twitter at Shafik Meghji. So that's ShafikMeghji. And yeah, he's got a lot to say. You can find out all about his adventures and where he's going next.
Yes, and so in our next episode, we'll be going to Jamaica with food writer Riaz Phillips.
Yes, yeah. So getting back on our foodie train, we've had 2 episodes off the food, so I think it's about time we got hungry again. But Riaz is an expert on sort of Caribbean food, and will be kind of taking us around a culinary journey of the Caribbean. So very, very excited about that. But yeah, we shall see you then. That episode should be out in a fortnight. But yeah, it's bye from me.
And bye from me.
And thanks very much, listener. We shall see you very soon.
Where to Go was produced by the team at DK Witness and the wonderful Julia Baker. It was presented by James Atkinson and Lucy Richards and mastered by Johnny Coddington at Bottle Rocket Recording. For more information about DK Witness, follow us on social media at DK Eyewitness or visit dk.com/eyewitness. And don't forget to please like, rate, review and subscribe the show wherever you get your podcasts. Your support means so much to us.